Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My family moved around constantly. By the time I finished high school, I had been to 9 different schools across 5 countries and 3 continents. Every single year I was the new kid. Being the new kid meant one thing: I was a target. The bullying wasn't just name-calling or jokes, it was violent, physical stuff. Groups of 3 or more kids would corner me and beat me up. It happened at every school. Since I never stayed anywhere long enough to take proper martial arts classes, I had to figure out my own way to defend myself. I decided to make myself as strong as possible. I would find hard objects and punch them every day to toughen up my hands and build strength. When we lived in Jamaica, I found this brass bell in a building near our house. Every day after school, I would punch that bell for 30 minutes straight. My knuckles would be bloody and raw, but I kept doing it. The training worked. I got incredibly strong enough that I could punch through walls if I needed to. That year we were living in England, and I was taking this mechanical workshop class. There was this kid in my class who made my life hell every single day. This guy would call me every racial slur you can imagine. He'd spread nasty rumors about me around school. He would trip me, push me, throw things at me, and just be a complete nightmare. But here's the worst part. Whenever I tried to defend myself, the teacher would punish me instead. The teacher was this middle-aged guy who clearly had favorites. Every time the bully did something to me and I tried to fight back, the teacher would step in and tell me to stop picking on the poor bully. One day, the bully called me the N-word at the top of his lungs. The whole class heard it. When I told him I was going to punch his face in, the teacher gave me detention for threatening him for no reason. This went on for months. The bully would do something horrible to me, I'd try to defend myself, and the teacher would punish me, while the bully got away with everything. Then came the day that changed everything. It was the end of the school year, and our final projects were due the next day. I was working on mine using one of the workshop saws. What I needed to do was going to take the entire class period, and I had gotten to the saw first. The bully also needed the same saw for his project. But here's the thing, he had been messing around for the entire 2 weeks we had to work on this assignment. While everyone else was working, he was goofing off and bothering other students. Now it was literally the last day, and he hadn't even started. The workshop had an unofficial rule that equipment was first come, first served. I got there first, so the saw was mine for as long as I needed it. The bully was out of luck, and it was his own fault. But instead of accepting that he had screwed up, the bully decided I had no right to use the saw. He walked over and shoved me away from the machine. I told him, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The bully didn't answer. He just grabbed my project and threw it on the ground. Months of work scattered across the dirty workshop floor. I pushed him back and demanded to know what his problem was. That's when he completely lost it and punched me right in the face. Here's the crazy part. For the first time all year, the teacher didn't step in to protect his favorite student. I looked over and saw him sitting at his desk, just watching with this sick smile on his face. I think he wanted to see the bully beat me up. The punch knocked me back a few steps, and something inside me just snapped. All those years of being bullied, all those months of this particular nightmare, all the rage I had been holding back, it all came out at once. The bully was already winding up for another punch, but he was slow and clumsy. I could see it coming from a mile away. Before he could throw it, I hit him with the hardest uppercut of my life. That punch sent him flying. I'm not exaggerating, he traveled 4 or 5 feet through the air before crashing into a pile of scrap metal. The sound was incredible. All that metal clanging and crashing when he landed in the middle of it. He was completely knocked out. When we finally got him untangled from the metal, there was this huge crescent-shaped gash on his right cheek. Blood was everywhere. Someone called an ambulance, and they had to give him between 6 and 12 stitches. The scar was permanent. The teacher went completely silent. His smug smile disappeared instantly when he realized his little plan had backfired. He thought he was going to watch me get beaten up, but instead, his favorite student was scarred for life. The principal launched a full investigation after that. A few other students and I told them exactly what had been going on all year, how the teacher had been letting the bully torment me while punishing me for trying to defend myself. The teacher got fired immediately. The bully's parents tried to sue the teacher for allowing the fight to happen. I'm not sure exactly what came of that, but I heard they had a pretty good case. You'd think that would be the end of it, but there's actually more to this story. About 2 or 3 years ago, I was grocery shopping when I saw a familiar face in the cereal aisle. It was the bully, now middle-aged but still sporting that crescent-shaped scar on his cheek, 40 years later, and you could still see it clear as day. When he saw me, his face went white. He literally froze like a deer in headlights, then quickly turned around and tried to hide behind a display of cornflakes. I decided to have a little fun. I started walking in his direction, not threatening or anything, just casually shopping. But every time I got close, he would panic and scurry to another aisle. Bully, oh God, oh God, oh God. I could hear him muttering to himself when he tried to avoid me. I followed him through the frozen foods, past the bakery, around the pharmacy section. Other shoppers were starting to stare at this grown man desperately trying to hide from someone in a grocery store. Finally, he ran into the men's bathroom and locked himself in a stall. I waited outside for a few minutes, but he never came out. I eventually got bored and finished my shopping. I sometimes wonder if he's still afraid of that 15-year-old kid who knocked him into next week all those years ago. Part of me hopes he learned something from it, but honestly, I think some people never change. They just learn to be more careful about who they pick on. That uppercut didn't just give him a permanent scar, it taught both of us something. I have a computer science degree, but getting there wasn't exactly straightforward. Because of my learning disability, I decided to spread my studies over an extra year so I wouldn't be overwhelmed with too many courses at once. This meant I'd often end up in classes with students from the year below me, which usually wasn't a problem. I'd always managed to find decent partners for group work before. That changed in my third year. The course was a programming lab where we had to work in pairs. Each week we'd do coding assignments and write reports about our work. When I made it known I needed a partner, this quiet girl approached me and said she was willing to split the work 50-50. She seemed nice enough, so I agreed. The first lab session arrived and we sat down to tackle our assignment. We had to learn a completely new programming language and interface, which was challenging but expected. When we worked through the problems, I noticed she was struggling quite a bit. No big deal, I thought. I'd code while she told me what to write after we planned it together, except she couldn't really contribute to the planning either. She just sat there looking confused while I explained everything I was doing, making sure she understood each step. When the lab ended, she offered to write the report since I'd done all the coding. Fair enough, I figured. 2 days before the deadline, she called me in a panic. She told me she was really struggling with the report and didn't know how to write it. I suggested we meet on campus the next day so I could help her finish it. The next morning, she called again. She said she couldn't make it to campus because something had come up. It was now the last day before the deadline. I told her to just send me whatever she had and I'd finish it. When I got her draft, it was barely started and what was there needed major corrections. I spent hours scrambling to complete it properly and submit it on time. The next week's lab session was when things really started falling apart. I arrived on time and waited. And waited. She showed up an hour late, apologizing and claiming traffic was really bad. That left us only 30 minutes to complete the assignment. The professor kept giving me stern looks because attendance was mandatory and affected our grades. I didn't even have time to be annoyed when I rushed through the work, barely finishing in time. Of course, she couldn't help with any of the programming because she'd missed all the new material covered at the beginning of class. I offered to meet with her later to explain what she'd missed so she could help with the report. She agreed but cancelled at the last minute. Once again, I did the entire report myself. The following week she was late again. After calling her several times and getting the same traffic excuse, I decided to just start without her. The pattern repeated itself. I did all the work while she sat there uselessly. Then I wrote the report alone. I told her this was unacceptable and that she couldn't keep being late. I pointed out that the class wasn't early in the morning and she had plenty of time to plan ahead. She apologized and promised she'd be on time next week. Next week came and I was sitting alone again. This time she didn't show up at all. When I called, her excuses became increasingly vague. I told her this wasn't fair because I was doing all the work while she got the same credit. I explained that if she had legitimate reasons for missing class, she should at least tell me what they were. I mentioned that I had my own health and family issues too, but I still showed up. She promised she'd be there next week. She actually did show up the following week, but since she'd missed so much material, she had no idea what was happening. She just sat there while I worked and naturally couldn't contribute to the report either. I even offered to tutor her on the missed material, but she declined. From that point on, she rarely showed up. When she did appear, she was completely lost and useless. I complained to the professor, but he brushed me off. He told me it wasn't his job to mediate between partners and that the most he could do was not dock points for attendance, since one of us was still showing up. I ended up getting an excellent grade, but so did she, despite doing absolutely nothing. I swore I'd never let myself get stuck with someone like that again. Fast forward to my final year. Every student had to complete a year-long graduation project in pairs. Since I was still working with students from the year below, they'd all already formed partnerships long before the assignments were even announced. That left me with only two options: someone I'd tried studying with before who I knew I clashed with completely, or my old lab partner. The first option got assigned to a different project and was working solo. That left only one choice, and my stomach dropped. I went to the supervising professor to ask if I could work alone. He refused, saying there was another student who needed a partner and it wouldn't be fair to leave her without one. When I said I'd really prefer to work solo for personal reasons, he told me that wasn't a good enough reason. He explained that part of my grade would be based on teamwork and my ability to collaborate with others. I left his office and sent a text to my old partner, explaining my concerns about working together again based on our previous experience. She tried to dismiss what had happened before, claiming she'd had valid reasons for her absences. I texted back that if she'd given me even a vague explanation at the time, or a heads up before missing class, I might understand. But I pointed out that she'd given no reasons then and wasn't giving any now, so why should I trust her? She promised things would be different, but her responses became slower and slower. The conversation dragged on for days, and I'd had enough. I went back to the professor and explained that the workload in our previous partnership had been completely unequal, and I refused to carry someone else's weight for an entire year. The professor assured me that the staff wouldn't let a student freeload off another. I asked if he could guarantee that and whether he'd be personally supervising our work to ensure it was equal. He admitted he had many projects to oversee. I told him then I wouldn't be partnering with her and asked him to assign me a solo project. After enough insistence, they finally agreed. They gave us separate but essentially identical projects, which was fine by me. I threw myself into that project, spending countless hours on campus, even working late into the night. When it came time for the mid-year progress presentations, my supervisor was impressed with how much I'd accomplished. During the presentations, I noticed the other similar project had barely gotten off the ground. Feeling a bit guilty about leaving her to struggle alone, I approached my former partner and offered to explain my methods and share what I'd learned. She politely declined, saying she didn't have much coding done yet but would manage. When the year progressed, my project exceeded all expectations. About 2 weeks before the final deadline, I was even asked to add additional features to make it more efficient for future use. I spent several sleepless nights implementing these improvements while preparing all the required documentation. Then the supervisors approached me with their casual request. They asked if I could sit down with my old partner and help her out, since I'd made such great progress and everything worked so well. Despite being swamped with final preparations, I agreed to try. I approached her and offered to explain my methods and review her code. She thanked me but said she didn't really have much coding done yet and would manage on her own. A few days later, the supervisors came back. They asked if I was going to help my old partner. I explained that I'd tried, but she said she didn't want my help. Then they made their real request. They asked if I could just send her my code so she could see how I did it, since my code obviously worked. I stared at them. They knew exactly why I'd refused to partner with her in the first place. This was precisely what I've been trying to avoid all year. But with the project almost due and needing a few extra days for the additional features they'd requested, I couldn't afford to get on their bad side. So I sent her the code. But they hadn't specified which version to send, so I gave her the first bare-bones version that accomplished the basic requirements. It was functional and gave her everything she needed to move forward. But by that point, she had no time to build on it properly. The due date arrived. I got my extra day and a half, submitted my completed project, and finally breathed easy when it was approved. Then came the project fair and final grades. I received a perfect score and special recognition for my work. My former partner was imprisoned at the fair. Her project didn't materialize, and I later learned she had to repeat the entire year and redo the whole project from scratch. The supervisors never approached me about helping her again. I'm 23 and expecting my first baby with my partner. What should be one of the happiest times of my life has turned into a nightmare thanks to my stepmother and her complete inability to respect boundaries. My mom died when I was young, and my dad remarried when I was 13. His new wife has been a constant source of stress ever since. She is the type of person who thinks being family gives her the right to steamroll over everyone else's feelings and decisions. During my teenage years, she made my life hell by constantly inserting herself into situations where she didn't belong, always under the guise of caring, but really, it was about control. The worst part is that when I was a kid, I was molested by my grandparents. My dad and stepmother failed to protect me from that situation, and I still hold them partially responsible. I've done a lot of therapy to work through that trauma, but it's shaped how I view safety and boundaries, especially now that I'm about to become a parent myself. When my stepmother decided she wanted to throw her own baby shower for me, separate from the one my partner's family was planning, I should have said no immediately. But my dad has spent years telling me he wants us to be a real family, and against my better judgment, I agreed to let her host it at their house. That's when things got even worse. A few days ago, my dad pulled me aside looking uncomfortable. He told me he needed to share something but begged me not to mention our conversation to my stepmother. When I asked what was wrong, he revealed that she had invited her father to the baby shower. My blood ran cold. Her father is openly racist, bigoted, and one of those hyper-religious people who uses his faith to judge and hate others. I've never had a good relationship with him, and she knows this. She also knows I don't want him around me, and I definitely don't want him around my future child. I asked my dad if he was kidding me, pointing out that she knows exactly how I feel about her father. He explained that she was planning to keep it a secret until the day of the shower, figuring I'd just deal with it once I was there. I told him that was exactly the kind of manipulative garbage she always pulls, putting me in impossible situations and then acting like I'm the problem when I don't go along with it. My dad suggested that maybe I could just tolerate it for one afternoon, but I explained that this wasn't about one afternoon. This was about her complete refusal to respect my boundaries. Again, this wasn't even the first time she'd pulled something like this. A couple months ago, at my college graduation, she tried to force interactions with her father despite knowing I didn't want him there. She has a pattern of doing whatever she wants and expecting everyone else to just deal with it. I talked it over with my partner that night. He suggested I didn't have to go and that we could just skip her shower entirely. I told him I wanted to go, but I wasn't going to let her ambush me and then pretend everything was fine. When he asked what I was thinking, I explained my plan to act surprised when I saw her father there, like I had no idea, then pull her aside and tell her exactly what this meant for our future relationship. That's exactly what I did. The day of the baby shower, I walked into their house and saw her father sitting in the living room. I put on my best shocked expression and said I didn't know he was going to be there. My stepmother immediately got defensive, explaining that he wanted to celebrate the baby too and that he was family. I asked if I could talk to her privately for a minute. We went into the kitchen, away from the other guests. I told her I needed her to understand that this was the last time she was going to make decisions about my life without consulting me. She said she didn't know what I meant and that she just thought it would be nice. I explained that she didn't think, that she never thinks about anyone but herself. I pointed out that she knew I didn't want him there and she invited him anyway. She was planning to ambush me with his presence and force me to deal with it. She said I was being dramatic and that it was just one day. I told her it wasn't just one day but a pattern. She'd been doing this for 10 years, stomping all over my boundaries and then acting like I was unreasonable for being upset about it. When she said she was trying to include everyone in the family, I corrected her, saying she was trying to control everyone in the family. I took a deep breath before delivering the news that would change everything. I explained that since she couldn't respect basic boundaries, she wouldn't be having unsupervised access to my child. She wouldn't be babysitting or involved in his adolescence in any meaningful way. This was what happened when someone chose their own comfort over the safety and emotional well-being of others. Her face went completely white. She asked if I was serious, and I said I was completely serious. I told her I wasn't going to let her treat my son the way she'd treated me, and I wouldn't let her put him in situations where he felt unsafe or uncomfortable just because it was convenient for her. She said that my father wouldn't stand for this, but I reminded her that my father had enabled her behavior for years. This was my child, and I got to decide who had access to him. She started crying then, but they weren't real tears. They were the manipulative tears she always used when she didn't get her way. She said she was just trying to bring the family together, but I pointed out that lying to me and ambushing me wasn't bringing anyone together. That was manipulation. I walked back out to the living room where my dad was talking to some relatives. I asked him to step outside with me. We went on to the back porch, and he asked what was going on, noting that my stepmother looked upset. I told him I'd told her that she wouldn't have unsupervised access to my son. He asked if I thought I was overreacting, saying it was just one afternoon. I explained that it wasn't just one afternoon, and he knew it. This was the same pattern she'd followed for years. She did whatever she wanted, violated my boundaries, and then he told me I was overreacting when I got upset about it. When he said she was trying her best, I pointed out that her best involved lying to me and manipulating situations to get her way. I wasn't gambling with my child's safety and emotional well-being the way he'd gambled with mine. He said that wasn't fair, but I said that what wasn't fair was him spending 10 years asking me to tolerate behavior he knew was wrong. What wasn't fair was that he'd failed to protect me when I was a child, and now he wanted me to put my own child at risk. He didn't have an answer for that. I told him I was going back inside to finish the shower and then leaving. If he wanted to have a relationship with his grandchild, he needed to understand that it would be on my terms, not hers. The rest of the shower was awkward, but I got through it. Her father kept trying to talk to me, and I was polite but distant. My stepmother spent the whole time crying to anyone who would listen about how unfair I was being. When it was time to open gifts, she had bought the most expensive stroller on my registry, clearly thinking she could buy her way back into my good graces. She said she hoped I liked it and that she wanted to give me something special. I thanked her and mentioned that I'd make sure to think of her every time I used it, to take my son places where he'd be safe and comfortable. Several of the other guests caught the comment and looked uncomfortable. After the shower, my dad called me that evening asking if I couldn't reconsider, saying she was really upset. I told him I was sure she was, but being upset about what happened wasn't the same as being sorry for what she did. When he said she was sorry, I explained that she was sorry she got caught and called out, not sorry for what she did. If she were really sorry, she would have apologized before I had to confront her. He asked what I wanted him to do, and I told him I wanted him to stop enabling her behavior. I wanted him to understand that protecting his wife's feelings was less important than protecting his daughter and grandchild. He said I was putting him in an impossible position, but I corrected him. I wasn't putting him in an impossible position. I was asking him to choose his family's safety over his wife's convenience, and that shouldn't be impossible. 3 weeks have passed since the baby shower, and my stepmother has tried everything to get back in my good graces. She sent flowers, cards, and even showed up at my apartment unannounced. Each time I've reminded her that my decision stands. Yesterday she tried a different approach. She called my partner directly. When he told me about it, I asked what she wanted. He explained that she wanted him to convince me to change my mind, saying she'd learned her lesson and it would never happen again. I asked what he told her, and he said he'd explained that I didn't need to be convinced of anything. I'd made a decision based on a pattern of behavior, and that decision protected our family. That's when I knew I'd made the right choice. My partner saw exactly what I saw, someone who was more concerned with getting her way than with understanding why her behavior was harmful. The baby is due in 2 months, and I feel more confident than ever in my decision. My child will grow up knowing that his parents will protect him even when it's difficult. He'll learn that boundaries aren't suggestions, and that love doesn't mean tolerating behavior that makes you feel unsafe. My stepmother may never understand why I made this choice, but that's not my problem to solve. I'm done sacrificing my peace of mind and my family's well-being to maintain the illusion of harmony. Some people have to learn the hard way that actions have results, even when those results are uncomfortable. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.